Chapter 2. Nightmares of a silent, empty town robbed me of a truly restful sleep. Since reports of the flu had started to surface, my dreams all shared a common theme. Whether I dreamed of a mass grave full of everyone I knew, or an empty town, the flu was at the forefront of my thoughts. I sat back in my bed with a deep sigh of relief. It was just a dream, I said to myself. I took a moment to relax, taking deep breaths and trying to forget about it. I must have been even more tired than I realized because I had slept clear to 8. I usually got up at 5 for work, so it had become natural for me to be an early riser. Today had one thing to offer that I had been looking forward to for 3 weeks. Bruno was going home. Finally, I would be rid of him and all his surprises he made for me while I was out. Eagerly, I snatched my phone off my nightstand and checked for messages. Soon, I promised Bruno as I set the phone back after seeing there was no word from his owners. As I shoved my legs in my pants one at a time, I smiled, listening to the neighbors hard at their morning fight. Any signs of life were welcome after that mess of a dream. I gotta stop watching the news. It's just too depressing, I said to Bruno as he watched me, fascinated with my morning routine. I dumped a fresh pile of food in his bowl, grabbed my keys, and headed outside. It was cold, windy, and unforgiving, but it was still a beautiful morning with all the sounds of life that were normally taken for granted. The walk to my favorite diner helped me forget my dream. The sight of people going about their morning routine was reassuring that all was well for the time being. If I didn't know any better, I would think this diner was a historical landmark purposely preserved from the 50s with its classic decor. But the fact of the matter was, the owner just never had enough money to redo the place. All things considered, it was still the best diner in town, and they just so happened to have the best Eggs Benedict. A stripped-down Harley-Davidson Fat Boy was parked outside. No windshield or bags, just an engine with a seat on it. Its owner was one of the local regulars, who I had regrettably come to know very well. "Deb, how many times do I have to tell you to get some air fresheners in this place?" Dennis shouted as he hung his coat on the back of his chair at the counter. Other patrons of the restaurant turned their heads at the sound of his voice. "It always smells like fart in here." The waitress meandered over in his direction to fill his recently flipped-over coffee cup. "Ever notice that smell follows you around everywhere you go? Perhaps it's the company and not the location that always smells." "Hey, Dennis," I said, taking the seat next to him. "Isn't it a little cold to be riding your bike around?" "What do I look like to you? A weekend biker?" He snarled at me. "I ride it because that's the kind of vehicle I have. I'm not one of these guys who only pulls it out of the garage when it's warm and sunny and rides it around town pretending to be some kind of bad guy." "All I'm saying is, it's just a little cold out," I said defensively, seeing that I clearly hit a nerve, which was easy to do with Dennis. He was known for being a little bit of a grouch. He looked exactly like one would expect, judging from his bike. Even though he was a little older, he was still a contender, always looking over his shoulder for the next fight. What he hated more than anything was to be lumped in with the local bikers, who he called the Rubber Knife Gang. Dennis always seemed like he had more than one screw loose and could snap at any time. It was because of this that I went out of my way to try to get to know him. I figured that if he ever went nuts for real, hopefully I would be on his good side. "What will it be?" asked the waitress. "The usual, Vince?" "Yes, please," I said. "Thanks, Deb. You know one day you're going to have to let me know your recipe for that hollandaise sauce. I swear it's the best I've ever had." She lowered her head and stared at me for a long moment over her glasses. "I'm sorry. That's proprietary. If I told you how to make it yourself, what would keep you coming back every week?" "What about you?" Deb asked Dennis coldly. "Same for you?" "Nah, give me a second," he said, grabbing the menu and looking it over as if he had never eaten there before. "Every time you come in here, you always study that menu. It hasn't changed since the place opened," Deb said incredulously. "We all know what you're going to order anyway. You get the same thing every time." Dennis glowered at her as he slammed the menu down on the counter. "I'll take some pancakes, then, with 2 eggs over medium and wheat toast. Not burnt. And make sure that pimply-nosed cook doesn't drop 'em on the floor this time," he said sharply. "And don't tell me he didn't. There were bits of hair and dirt in 'em last time." "Surprise, surprise, what did I tell you? The same thing every time," Deb said, glaring back at Dennis as she jotted down the order and snatched the menu up. Dennis unraveled his napkin and tucked it in his collar in anticipation of his meal. "I might as well ride it while I can," he said, referring to the bike outside. "Soon the world's going to end, and I want to go out doing something I love." "I'm sorry. I must have missed it, but you can't blame me. I'm just not as observant as you, Dennis." I flipped over my own coffee cup. "Few people are. But there's no denying it, not with that flu bug going around. The thing about germs is, there's no easy way to screen for them. If you have it and don't know, you can walk into a crowded airport, infecting everyone you pass with every breath you take. No matter how tough the security, there's no way to completely stop them. Remember, it only takes one sick person to sneak past security and spread infection." The waitress returned shortly with our plates. It was no mystery that they were glad to have regulars like Dennis to keep the restaurant going, but they did seem to rush him along. Dennis dug his fork into a mess of pancakes after dousing them thoroughly with syrup and topping them off with a healthy portion of butter. "All that's going to kill you someday," Deb said as she dropped off 2 glasses of water. "Are you a doctor?" "No, you're not. Stop trying to tell me how to live my life," Dennis shouted. "And besides, now that flu is loose, most likely that's what's going to get us all." "Loose?" I echoed, confused. "Temper, temper," Deb said, ignoring my comment and giving Dennis a warning glance. "It seems to me like you're jumping to conclusions just a little bit," I said, in an attempt to change the subject. "They have that city in China under control now. It seems like it just burned itself out. Diseases like that have been around as long as people, and stuff like this happens every now and then." Dennis finished chewing and took a sip of coffee before saying, "You might be right, but I just hear rumors that there have been cases in the U.S., and they've been keeping it quiet to avoid widespread panic. They were successfully able to keep people from leaving that town once they realized they had a problem. But who's to say someone didn't get out before they sealed it off? Also, somehow this time is different. It isn't exactly the same as the bug that hit China. It is clearly similar, but it seems like it's more effective. I hear it's more contagious than the last one, and the people who didn't die from it were rushed anyway. Or just maybe it hasn't changed at all, and whoever was reporting on it in China wasn't telling us the whole truth about what was going on there. But then again, I also heard that it's not as bad as the news makes it out to be. You never can trust anything you hear. And besides, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Just think what'll happen when people start to panic. Don't even get me started on what kind of mess that would be." After washing some of his pancakes down with a swig of his coffee, he let out an unnatural burp that was loud enough to grab the attention of half of the diner. He turned to look at me, and I got the impression he had spent a lot of time thinking this through. "Just take my word for it. It wouldn't hurt to take the next couple of weeks off of work and just hang around the house." "That shouldn't be a problem. I just got laid off. I was thinking of going to Chicago, but that can wait," I said unenthusiastically. "Chicago?" Dennis shouted so loudly that other patrons turned to look at what was so outrageous. "Why would you want to visit that crap hole? On a good day, that city's no place to visit. You know how many people are murdered in that toilet town each night?" "No," I said truthfully. "Do you?" "No, but that's not the point. I do know it's a lot. Enough to where I never go there, that's for sure." "You never go anywhere," Deb added. "Was I talking to you?" Dennis barked. "Why don't you go wash something?" "You talk to me like that one more time, and I'll see to it that you're barred for life from this place," Deb snapped. "You miserable old git." Dennis wiped the pancakes from his beard. Well, that was uncalled for, don't you think? Not really. She's getting worse. She never used to be that mean to me, Dennis said. The older you get, the less respect people have for you. You're no saint yourself, I said under my breath. What'd you say? What? I said, startled. Oh, me? Nothing. Okay, back to what I was saying. Dennis tossed his napkin on his plate and slid it away. He turned and looked at me with his mismatched eyes as he leaned a little closer. Stay out of Chicago. Okay, I said uncomfortably. You don't want to go there anyways. That city is getting so bad they're going to need their own Batman soon to get the crime under control. Better yet, stay out of any city for a while. As a matter of fact, stay away from people altogether. This flu bug is nothing to mess around with. I heard it got out of China, and the person who told me was no alarmist. While you can, get supplies and hold up in your house. If they haven't started isolating infected areas yet, they will soon. Once cities are quarantined, there will be some reports of people helping each other out, trying to get through it together. But give it a couple weeks and you'll see all that go out the window fast. People are always willing to share their food if they think they're going to be able to get some more. But what happens when they go to the store and the shelves are empty? You lost me, I said. Do you even watch the news? Dennis asked, shaking his head. Of course, I replied skeptically. Dennis was always convinced of the worst. Who doesn't? The news I saw said that it's under control. Well, we'll see about that. You should also know about the problems the world leaders are trying to fix, which, of course, they never do. Things are so charged right now, it's only a matter of time before the people get sick of it. As it is, people are at the ends of their ropes. This flu is just what we need right now. Give it a couple weeks. Once it spreads a little more, you'll see. What do you think's going to happen when people are afraid to leave their houses because people are falling over in the streets from some plague? He grimaced. People can be sick and broke and still survive. But when they start starving, and the prospect of leaving their houses means they might encounter a life-threatening virus, you'll see, they will start to get violent. The National Guard troops we've been seeing pouring into town will step in, and then you'll see some fireworks. You seem like the type of person who likes to point out all the problems but never offer up a solution, I said sarcastically. What precautions are you taking? How do you propose people make it through the end of the world? Buy guns and ammo? Dennis let out a laugh that sounded like a car trying to start. You want to know another little secret? What's that? I asked. Most people are rotten to the core, only looking out for themselves. Oh, sure, there are those who are pure of heart, for the most part, but they are far and few between, and soon enough people will start to show their true colors. When that happens, those with black hearts will wipe out the people who are thinking clearly, just like when weeds attack a flower. It is never the other way around. Usually the evil wins, and this virus is just the thing to get it started. I disagree, I said abruptly. People are mostly good, but no one's perfect. We all have our demons we have to battle on a regular basis. Every day we have to work on it and try to improve our surroundings and ourselves. There is no idle ground. You're either moving forward or backward. Most people want to improve. They just lack the resources or motivation. Given the opportunity, I think you could be surprised by what other people will do for one another. Dennis looked at me, disappointed. Well said for someone who never went to bed hungry in his life, he said, then paused. Again, he leaned uncomfortably close. Have you ever seen someone die from starvation? You know, I heard a crazy statistic that no matter how advanced a country gets, it will never be more than 3 meals away from a revolution. How calm do you think your neighbor will be when he starts losing his hair from a lack of protein, or his kid's teeth rot from malnutrition? You're a strong, young, healthy kid. I'll bet you could make it a week without eating before you would seriously consider eating that dog you're watching for your friends. He snatched a toothpick off the counter and bit down on it before continuing. I know you think I'm just some old nut who likes to always have something to complain about. But I like you, Vince. Do yourself a favor. As soon as you're done here, go to the store. Stock up. I've been stocking up for years, but I had an urgent need for some whiskey last night and made a mad dash to the store to get some. If and when you go, look around and tell me if it seems a little busier to you than usual. Chaotic, even. It did last night. People were filling their carts to the brim. I even saw families with more than one. Right now, it's just a rumor, and easily brushed off as such. If I'm wrong, then you won't have to go shopping for a while. If I'm right, well, then you can thank me later. But then again, what do I know? I'm just an ornery old git. Yes, you are, said Deb as she dropped off our checks. What difference does it make if you die from a virus or a heart attack? Your health is so bad you're going to be worm chow in no time. Quit scaring the boy. We sat in silence for a while. I sipped on what coffee I had left and listened to the sounds of the cafe around us while I let what he said sink in. Well, then, there's not a moment to lose, I said, paying my bill and snatching up my coat. I must say, I do hope you're wrong, though, Dennis. If the world ends and you're gone, who will I eat my breakfast with? You and me both, said the waitress unenthusiastically as she passed by us with the coffee pot. Need a warm-up? No, thanks, I replied. I'm on my way out. Don't you worry about me. I'm as well prepared for that as one could be. And if anyone comes to my house trying to make waves, they'll be sorry, Dennis warned. You're always so worried someone's trying to get you, said Deb as she cleared plates off the counter. Was I talking to you, woman? Dennis barked. When I'm talking to you, you'll know it. For a split second, I thought Deb was going to dump her arm full of dirty dishes on Dennis's head. Better be careful, Dennis, I chimed in. You probably shouldn't talk like that to the people who make your food. Next time you come in, they'll do more than clean the floor with your pancakes. Next time they'll probably spit in them. Who knows? Maybe worse. Oh, that won't change anything, she replied. I've been spitting in his breakfast for years, and it hasn't stopped him yet. If I get sick, Dennis snapped, I'm going to take back that necklace I gave you last year for our anniversary. Was there ever a time when you guys didn't argue? I asked. I can't remember, Deb answered. But even still, I guess I should be happy. None of the other waitresses' husbands come and visit them at work. After all, I know that his tough guy exterior is really only there to protect his big, lovable heart. That's right. Don't you forget it either. Dennis peeled open his wallet, counted out exact change for his bill, and stuffed the wallet back in his pocket. I am a catch. What? No tip? Deb said. What for? For bringing my food from there to here? Deb held out her hand, waiting for Dennis to dig out his wallet once again. You do realize this is like taking money out of one pocket and putting it in the other, right? It makes me feel good, Deb said. And when I get home, you're going to rub my bunions you forgot to last night. I didn't forget, I just didn't want to, Dennis said. And with that, I stood and walked toward the exit. Hey, Vince, I heard Dennis call after me. Yeah? Goodbye. With that, I froze. Not from his words, but the tone. Somehow it sounded like raw terror. I turned and looked at him. In that moment, his tough facade was gone, and I saw the old man that he was. I saw the worry of our fate in his brow, stubbornness to press on in his set jaw, the turn of his lips betraying the flood of emotion just under his skin, but most of all a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Deb said nothing, but stood behind Dennis, her hands on his shoulders, The two of them together seemed to be a formidable force, able to weather any storm. I only nodded as I tightened my collar, suddenly chilled as I walked out. I decided not to go back to my apartment. Instead, I crossed the street and went down the block to the drugstore on the corner. If there was going to be a pandemic, there was no harm in taking a few precautions. After entering the store, I stopped, a little surprised. It was noticeably busier than I ever remembered. The shelves were starting to look a little bare as well. Perhaps this wasn't a bad idea after all. I walked through the aisles, grabbing things that might be useful: rubber gloves, hand sanitizer, miscellaneous over-the-counter drugs, first aid kit, as well as a few other small items, and headed for the checkouts. After standing in line, I noticed an argument between two guys in the back of the store because one of them coughed and didn't cover his mouth. When it started to get a little too heated, the store clerks kicked them both out. On a whim, I pulled into the local library on my way home. As I ran past the two iron griffins guarding the entrance, I noticed that the environment was in direct contrast to the drugstore. No one else had thought to stock up on books at the library. I searched through the shelves, grabbing anything that covered molecular biology and anatomy, as well as books about the discovery and spread of other diseases like the Spanish flu, SARS, polio, and smallpox. The librarian, an older lady with a gray button-up sweater and glasses balanced on the tip of her nose, gave me a variety of strange looks as she read the titles. As I pulled my truck into the parking lot of my place, I looked at all the bags of stuff I had bought and started to feel a little silly. Just because of a rumor, I went out and bought enough gloves and masks to supply a small hospital. But then again, what if Dennis was right? I sat a while longer reviewing everything I had learned about the virus that was in China, how it devastated the city that they sealed off, and how the scientists researching it still had unanswered questions. I looked at the few bags on the seat next to me and realized how pathetic it actually looked if I was to be shut in the house for a long period of time. What I had gleaned from the drugstore wasn't nearly enough, and I needed to go grocery shopping anyway. I'll just grab some extra food just in case. There was a large grocery store on the other side of town that was always well stocked with a big selection of items. It was busier than usual, and I noticed most people's carts were filled to the brim. Like the drugstore, people seemed more volatile and quick to anger over seemingly unimportant matters. "It is a small preview of what's to come," I mumbled. If the virus did hit this area, the easygoing people I knew would be at each other's throats in no time at all. I became very aware of how often people touched their faces, wiped their noses, and touched a door to open it, in the same place where 100 other people before them had touched, unknowingly spreading or contracting countless germs. In the deli, I saw one person sneeze into his hand, then grab at a sample on a plate. Seconds later, 5 other people touched the same plate. Every doorknob, shopping cart handle, bathroom faucet, or any other surface I saw became a potential death sentence. I made my usual passes through the aisles, dumping large amounts of canned food, as well as other non-perishables. I told myself that if I was wrong, I wouldn't have to go grocery shopping for a long time, as it was one of my least favorite activities in the world. I looked at it as a win-win scenario. If something happened, I would have food. If nothing happened, I wouldn't have to set foot in this place for at least 3 months. Okay, probably not 3 months. I didn't have that much food in my cart. At least, not yet. It then dawned on me, how much food would I need? Standing in the checkout line getting ready to pay, I was horrified as I watched money go from customers to the clerk, get shifted around, then later given back to another customer as change. When it came time for me to pay, I used a credit card. When I was done shopping, I drove home, and after shutting down my truck, I slowly turned around to look at the mound of food in the back. I wondered if I had gone overboard. When it was all said and done, I had hit up 2 different stores and filled my truck with supplies. When I checked out with 2 carts full of canned food, I got looks from the guy running the register. I bought everything I thought I might need to stay put in my house for a long period of time, if necessary. I ended up not only grabbing food, but toothpaste and extra brushes, soap, paper goods, water, beer, and some dog food for Bruno just in case. I was even so thorough as to buy a nice collection of movies out of their bargain bin for if and when I got bored. When I was done, the only thing that kept me from going back into the store and getting more stuff was the fact that I had no more room in my truck. The cab was even packed with bags. After countless trips, I finally managed to bring every bit of it up to my apartment. I unpacked what I had in my kitchen and started to organize it. I didn't have much room in my micro kitchen, but I stored as much as I could there and put the rest in my spare bedroom. I walked back into the kitchen and wondered how it might look to someone. It made me look like a hoarder. One wall in my kitchen was stacked with canned goods from floor to ceiling, 4 cans deep, with various types of soup and veggies. And in the living room on my coffee table was the giant pile of books I snagged from the library, which was going to be my homework while I isolated myself. My mind instantly filled with worst-case scenarios regarding what could and would happen if things got worse. I realized I had no idea regarding the best course of action. Should I stay put? Should I get out of town? If I did, where would I go? And how long would I have to stay away? I eventually remembered that I also had a box of MREs in my other bedroom for backpacking, because I had seen a good deal on them if I bought them in bulk. At this point, I only wished I had gotten more. What I had left stashed at the bottom of my closet may last an additional 3 days. They could be used as a last resort. I had plenty of food for now, and I didn't much like the taste of them anyway. That night was just like countless other previous nights. I finished cleaning up things in my apartment, made myself something to eat, and sat down once again to watch the news. There was information about some confirmed cases of a flu virus that was surfacing in various areas across the country, including coverage of the panic around the affected areas. As people vacated the towns, they were met with opposition from the National Guard in order to return home. It wasn't long before news outlets began reporting on the death toll. People stayed home from work. Some businesses outright closed in order to discourage the congregating of people. As Dennis predicted, they also pointed out the shortage of food and other supplies as well. Now it wasn't just a rumor. It was a fact. There were more break-ins, even in the nicest of areas, as people started looking for something to eat. A state of emergency was declared, and limited rations provided by the National Guard. The local news covered my own town, where a semi-truck of provisions parked outside City Hall was rushed by people trying to get their share. The same scene played out in countless towns across the country until reports came in of a wave of infection through the troops themselves. The local police suffered the same fate, as they too were operating with limited resources due to the lack of staff. I soon felt foolish going shopping and rubbing elbows with countless people. I could have contracted it today, standing in line while I bought my supplies. I decided then and there that I wouldn't leave the apartment again unless it was absolutely necessary. I would just try and wait it out. By late that night, I started to get worried. Bruno's owners should have picked him up already. I couldn't reach them by phone either, so I checked online and found that their flight had to be canceled. As a matter of fact, not only was their flight canceled, but all air travel was being grounded in order to help stop, or at least slow, the spread of this flu. I thought it strange that they hadn't even called to let me know I would be stuck watching their mutt. I had enough food for Bruno to eat for a while, especially with the extra bags I had bought for him. It wasn't the first time I had to buy food for him, though, because one time he got into the closet where I kept his bag of food and gorged on it. I would have to start rationing it just to make sure it lasted. I didn't think I would be stuck with him for long. However, Bruno was always hungry. He would sit next to the closet and whine if he thought I was holding out on him. He was going to have to learn now to go without, or at least less than he normally got. One thing was for sure. It seemed as if it was going to be a while before I left my apartment. I figured I might as well get comfortable. It was getting late, and I'd had enough doom and gloom for one day. I asked myself over and over if staying in my apartment and hunkering down was the thing to do, or if I should get away from large groups of people. But if I did, where would I go? I thought about it as I got ready for bed, rolling around my options, weighing out the pros and the cons of each plan, failing to come up with a risk-free solution should things get that bad. Most of my friends would be in the same situation, just in a different town. Not to mention the risk of getting from one apartment to another just to be trapped someplace else. I sat down on my bed after brushing my teeth, barely noticing Bruno already picking out his corner of the mattress as I made a call to a friend who lived about 20 minutes east of me. The phone rang a couple times before he picked up. "Hello?" His voice half yelled over what sounded like a party in the background. "Mr. Zavril, how's it going? It's Vince," I said, half forgetting why I called him in the first place. "Oh, hey. What's up, man?" he said. "Nothing, just seeing what you've been up to. Anything good?" I asked. "Actually, yeah. Did you hear about that flu going around?" "A little," I said, surprised. I heard about it popping up in Chicago, nothing more. "Well, you remember that friend of mine, Ryan?" He hardly waited for a reply. "He works in the ER of the new hospital they just built. Ever since he started, he calls me with bizarre stories. Weird injuries people show up with and survive. Anyway, he said there are patients coming in the ER complaining of the symptoms they have been warning us all about. But that's not the weird part. He said that they've been told to separate all the people from the rest of the patients. To isolate them. Once the fever sets in, they have to restrain them to their beds. Apparently, the ones who don't die go into some kind of coma. Once that happens, troops take them away. But no one knows where. Then, they have to make room for the next one. They're starting to get a little overwhelmed. So, anyway, me and a bunch of other people decided to wait it out at my place. On the news, they said to stay home if possible. No one has to work until this mess settles down anyway. We just cleaned out a bunch of stores, and we're getting ready to try to wait out the end of the world. I made sure to only invite people under the age of 25. "Why?" I asked, puzzled. "Because survival is all about attitude. I only want positive people around me, people who still think they're going to have good lives. They think their marriages are going to be good. They are going to find good jobs in the field that they studied in school. Their kids are going to be well behaved. They still believe they won't lose their hair, get fat, and so on. Life hasn't really had a chance to kick them in the pants yet, and hence the positive attitude." "Yes, but then you're left with nothing but inexperienced people," I countered. "Aaron, where did you put the taco dip?" a voice in the background yelled. "Behind the milk, top shelf," he called back. "You guys don't sound real worried." "Just because I'm not freaking out doesn't mean I'm not worried," he said in a very unconvincing tone. "The flu isn't anything to take lightly, but most of what you hear on the news and radio is people panicking, making the most out of every little rumor. Just the other day, I heard that the people who survived the flu had all sorts of mental issues from the high fever, and that's why they took them away. The same guy told me they were violent and out of control. Schizophrenia or something, I don't know. I told him that the people freaking out around town were looters, trying to get what they could while the getting was good. Nothing more, nothing less." "It isn't behind the milk," the voice in the background said again. "If I find it, I'm going to smack you in the soup coolers. If it isn't behind the milk, it can't have gone far. The fridge isn't that big," he said to the voice. "Anyway, since no one has work, most people are hanging at home. The last thing anyone wants is to get sick, even if it is the normal flu and not some superbug. So we decided to throw a toga party, just to pass the time." "I think I saw Jack with it," the voice proclaimed. "Then why don't you go ask him where it was?" he said, growing more stern. "Use that thing under your nose for something other than a booze funnel, you dolt." I shook my head. I should have known that I wouldn't be the only one to have that idea. "I heard the people who get sick either die or are reduced to a shell of a person," I said, recalling my conversation with Dennis. I hadn't thought of getting together with anyone else to hunker down. Aaron had a really nice house with a lot of extra rooms. I started to consider leaving and meeting up with them instead of staying at my lousy apartment. Well, who knows what's going to happen, but one thing's for sure, don't get sick. As he paused, I could hear a roar of laughter in the background from a carefree crowd. I would have called you, Aaron blurted out, as I was building up the courage to ask if he had room for one more. But word got out what we were doing, and people just started showing up with whatever food they had in their house and sleeping bags under their arms. It's actually kind of packed now. We're sleeping 2 to a room. Nah, that's okay. I like my place better anyway, I lied. Well, I gotta get going. Things to do, you know, Aaron said, cutting me off. But in the meantime, try to avoid crowds. Will do, I said as I hung up the phone and thought how I planned to do just that.